Fringe Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime.
Welcome, everybody, to Dark Fringe Radio. I am your host, Will Martinez, and we have a superb guest on our podcast tonight. I'm going to try to do a decent intro for this gentleman, but his name is Jeff Belanger. He is an author, podcaster, storyteller, adventurer, explorer of the unexplained. He's written more than a dozen books and has been published in more than 6 languages. He's an Emmy-nominated host, writer, producer of the New England's Legends series on PBS and Amazon Prime, which if you guys haven't seen any of that, you guys should check that out. And he also provides programs and lectures through audiences all throughout the world. He has been the writer and researcher for every episode of Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. That's how I got to know him. And Jeff has actually made media appearances on hundreds of radio and television programs over his 20-year career and has had passion for mysteries and legends. In his latest book, Wicked Strange, and photographed by Frank Grace, I want to make sure that he gets also credit for this, but the book is full of monsters and devils that lurk in the woods, lakes, and seas. Explored are some of the most best known and some of the most obscure legends in the Northeast area. And so we're talking including Lake Champlain's Champ, the Cumberland Vampire of Rhode Island, the Gloucestershire Sea Serpent, the Black Dog of West Peak in Meriden, Connecticut, which actually I have family not too far from there, and the Flying Moose of Maine. So with all that being said, please welcome to Dark Fringe Radio, Mr. Jeff Belanger. Jeff, how are you doing tonight?
We are doing great. It's awesome. It's an exciting time in the world. Never a dull moment.
Yeah.
So sometimes it seems like ghosts and monsters are the safer place to be.
Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, I'd rather take my chances with those than some of the things that are going on right now. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff, I mean, I followed your career, like I said to you earlier, since the very first season of Ghost Adventures, because when Ghost Adventures came out, such a popular show, I was like reading the credits one day. I was like, who is responsible for the show? Like, who's responsible for doing the research? Who's responsible for like finding the locations and things of that nature? And then your name just kept popping up. I was like, who is this Jeff Belanger guy? And we just talked about this about 17 years ago. This is when it all started. But then, I followed you since then, and you have been on a tear. I mean, just literally like. Your career has not stopped. I mean, it's just, it seems like you're almost like the what do they call it? Almost like the architect of the matrix of this whole thing, because you've been around so long. But tell me, for those that don't know who's been researching, you've been researching for years. Can you give our listeners a quick background on your journey into the paranormal and the strange?
Sure. So I was born in Massachusetts, but I mostly grew up in Sandy Hook, Connecticut.
Okay.
And the reason that's relevant is because the next town over is Monroe, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And so from a very young age, I knew Ed and Lorraine Warren. And Newtown is a pretty typical Sandy Hook's part of Newtown, for those who don't know. But that area is pretty typical of New England, historic homes, but nice communities and so on. But back then, the Warrens were like the local weirdos.
Yeah.
And this was the 1980s, like there was no internet yet. Their phone number was listed. If you had a ghost problem, you just looked up their number and you could call them.
The yellow pages.
And I've been in there, no, white pages.
White pages,
Not even the yellow, the white pages. And so I was in their kitchen. I mean, I've been in their kitchen. The phone just rings all day, and they just pick it up and tell you to get rid of your Ouija boards. And and so I would go see them at libraries and stuff. You have to realize they're way more famous today than they ever were when they were alive.
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the Conjuring movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends who said their houses were haunted. I was just intrigued. I love this stuff. And I went to school to be a writer, and I started working for newspapers and magazines. And around October, I went looking for haunted features. And that turned into a website called Ghost Village. I started in 1999.
Wow.
And then I started writing books, and then 2008 Ghost Adventures came along and I started working on that show. It was just supposed to be one season, 8 episodes.
Really?
That's all it was supposed to be. I mean, that networks don't commit beyond that because
of course,
what if it flops, right?
Right.
And it didn't.
It became a hit.
Yeah, people kept watching, and so we kept working, and so it's really cool. It's as you said, I mean, I write books, I do my own talks, I do my own podcasts, I do all this stuff because I love it. I love that once you go down the rabbit hole, I mean, there's no point in going halfway, right?
Yeah,
You just keep going. And
absolutely.
so this is my subject. This is my life's work at this point.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. You've done such a great job of, as they say, curating all of your, information and things that you've come across. I mean, that's it's really fantastic. So you've written several books, of course. We've already talked about that, and about the supernatural, the bizarre. What inspired you to write this particular book, Wicked Strange?
Yeah, so this book was born God, probably like close to 15 years ago. I
Okay.
was working on a PBS series that I hosted and produced called New England Legends. And the thing about that show, like, it was self-funded. My producer partner, Tony Dunn, and I, like we funded it ourselves. PBS gave us nothing. And then it got onto Amazon Prime and I mean we didn't even break even with it. We just did it
Wow.
because we love the stories.
Hmm.
But I was like, man, it's so expensive and so time consuming to make a TV show. It'd be great to be able to do these stories a little more quickly. And I love podcasts and I love podcasting. It's so
Hmm.
intimate, as you know, right? It's just
Hmm.
you and one other person having
That's right.
this conversation. And I thought, man, with theater of the mind, we could really do some cool like audio documentaries. And
Hmm.
so I started this format where they're short, they're scripted. We've got sound effects and voice actors, and it's just I always want to know like how did we get here? How did we get to the point where we said that house is haunted or there's
Yeah.
a monster in that lake? And the answer to that you got to go back in time and you sort of backfill. And so the podcast started and then the audience grew and then it just became crowdsourced. We were getting emails all the time just saying, "Hey, have you heard about this weird legend in my town?" And you go, "No, I haven't."
Mm.
But that's next week now, right? Like I mean,
Hmm.
you've got
Hmm.
these great leads and so it just grew and grew. And then Frank Grace, who's the photographer in this book, he and I started producing an annual Haunted New England calendar back in 2014. And
Wow.
so, yeah, we went through a traditional publisher and we made $300 each. I don't mean to brag. I don't mean to be throwing big numbers
Hey,
around. You
hey,
know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
right.
Um, but
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that didn't even pay for the gas.
Yeah. That's crazy when you think back, think
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, yeah. So we were like, oh my goodness gracious. So then we started just publishing it ourselves and loving it. And we
Mhm.
made this calendar every year. And it's his photography. And Frank can tell a whole story with a photo, man. He just knows how to capture the spooky.
Mhm.
And then I tell it with words. And so we were saying right along, we got to make this a book. I mean, we keep doing this calendar, we keep doing these stories. We partnered together on a stage show where like I would tell stories in front of his photos. His photos would sort of cycle behind
Ah,
me.
nice.
And yeah, so it was a matter of time, and then finally we hunkered down and did it, and pitched it to a couple publishers, and got to work, and this is the culmination, and it's he's such a fun guy to work with because he's one of those buddies, when you call and you're like, hey, I got this crazy idea, and he goes, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
like,
didn't even
do you
finish
want
the
to hear?
sentence,
Do you
right?
want to hear the idea? It doesn't really matter. I'll get my
Yeah.
camera. Let's go. Okay, all
Yeah.
right. We're probably gonna get dirty. One of us could die, and he's like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Let's roll. And so he's
Mm.
always up for an adventure, man. And we'd like, whatever, whether it was going to like a haunted place or going to see some abandoned site of some kind, like he's always up for it.
Question for you. I was very curious about after going through the book. Does the picture come before the story sometimes, or does the story always come first?
The story usually comes first, but
Mm.
Frank and I were talking about this the other day. There's a place in New Hampshire called Beer Bottle Church, which is
Mm.
really kind of a funny story. I mean, it is a church, a Baptist church.
Yeah.
Baptists, I don't know how many you know, for stereotyping, tend to frown on alcohol. Uh,
Absolutely.
however, if you look at the steeple of this church, 1800s white, picture a white steepled church in New England. That's what it looks like. Except there's it's called a finial, but it looks like a beer bottle. I mean, to ask 10 out of 10 people, they'll all say, oh, it looks like a beer bottle.
Yeah.
And so it got the nickname of Beer Bottle Church. And
Mm.
there's not a lot of good photos of it because you need a really powerful lens to get a good tight shot of that steeple at the top. But you
Mhm.
could see it from the street. And so Frank was in the area shooting something else, and he's like, "I'm gonna go grab Beer Bottle Church," because we had done a podcast episode on it,
Okay.
and it wasn't even gonna be in the book. But then he showed me the photo, and I went, "Oh, that's so good. We got to put it in the
We
book
got to
now,
put
right?"
it in.
So
Yeah.
that was one of
Yeah.
those cases where he had such a great photo that we had to include the story. But usually it was the story dictated where the photo would come from.
Yeah, no, you know what? And it's interesting to me too on this particular book because you guys focus on the Northeast. You know, I have ties to the Northeast. I have
Hmm.
family that's in Waterbury, Connecticut, and
Yeah.
so you know, Meriden not very far from there. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot of haunted places just in the Northeast. Why do you think that is? Is that because where we just settled when we came over it, you know, from the beginning? I mean, is that the reason why?
It's, I was talking about this very recently. The land in New England is no older than the land in LA or Florida or anywhere else, right? I mean,
Absolutely,
it's a
yeah,
planet.
right.
Um, and there's been humans here for about 12,000 years.
Hmm.
And by the way, New England was perfectly normal before those people arrived. It's the
Hmm.
people, it turns out, that makes everything weird.
Usually.
Um, it's been downhill. So 12,000 years ago, totally normal, and then just downhill since.
Yeah.
But in this region, we've got this sense of preservation.
Mm.
We preserve our buildings, we preserve our main streets. When you drive down a main street in one of our small towns, that's what that town looked like 150 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, no cars and electricity wires and stuff like that, but the town hall was probably even the same color. I mean, I
Hmm.
know many towns where if you bought a house on Main Street and you want to paint it, you have to ask the town's permission on the color because they want to maintain this historic aesthetic. So
Right.
we have a sense of preserving and acknowledging and honoring these old buildings, and so many of them sometimes tend to have a ghost attached to them.
Hmm.
And we're sort of matter of fact about our ghosts. You know, it's like, yeah, that one's haunted, that one isn't. What else do you want to know? No
Yeah.
big deal. It doesn't have to be this big argument or discussion. It's just more sort of matter of fact. We also have some pretty good winters here, and we hibernate. And when we hibernate, we tend to share stories. So
Oh
I think
yeah.
that's all part of it. It's kind of like this perfect storm of like puritanical sensibility
Yep.
with historic preservation and appreciation, and not getting too hung up on labels like haunted or not haunted, and just saying like, yeah, could be, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's
We're
that's
past
it.
that at this point.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't have to fight over it,
Right.
like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that's one of the for years I've been saying I don't even think we can argue anymore that there are such things as ghosts. I don't. I mean,
I think we're past that point. Yeah.
what they are, oh, we can argue about that forever, right?
Right.
Like what they
Hmm.
are, sure. But I was talking to someone about this and I said like the fact that there's a word for it,
Hmm.
that's checkmate right there, right?
Hmm.
There's a word
Hmm.
for it. We don't have a word for nothing, like
Right.
ghost, spirit, and
Spirit.
there's a word for it in every language, and we have an understanding of what it means. And
Hmm.
so, again, we can argue forever about what a ghost is, but that it is, I don't think we can argue.
Yeah, so I imagine so most of the stories that you have in this book is probably procured through the TV show, the podcast, and I'm sure people just, you know, writing in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the best part when someone tells
Right.
you something you've never heard of,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
obscure thing. Because I mean, I only grew up where I grew up in one little town, and
Right.
someone else has their stories from their town, and you wouldn't know it unless you live there or know someone who lived there. And so it's been really fun to just see people sort of network and combine over these things and share their tales.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Dudleytown, Connecticut?
My entire paranormal career started in Dudleytown.
Really?
Yeah, so
Talk to me about that.
sure. Yeah, so it was 1997,
Okay.
and a friend of mine who went to film school said, I want to do a documentary on this ghost town in Connecticut called Dudleytown. And I
Yeah.
said, that sounds great. That was the first one of the first projects I worked on with the Warrens. So we interviewed them about Dudleytown, hiked up in those woods. It's in the northeastern part of the state in a little town called Cornwall.
Hmm.
And Dudley Town, it was never a town, it was never incorporated. It was really more of a village. It was a tough place to live because it was on a mountain, not a very high mountain, but just bad enough that farming up there would have been brutal.
Hmm.
And it was in the shadow of another mountain. So again, farming was not really a great idea in this land. And they hung in there for like 100 years, but there was some strange deaths. Someone struck by lightning. There were suicides. There were murders, and then mostly people left, and all that was left behind were cellar holes.
Hmm.
So we talked to the landowners, we talked to the Warrens. We were sort of documenting and unfolding this whole documentary, and the project never got funded. And so I
Mm.
had all this research I did, and I wanted to learn how to build websites. So in 1999, I started a website Dudleytown was never a ghost town. It was a ghost village. And that
Village.
was the impetus for ghostvillage.com, which was my first website and
Oh,
the
yeah.
foundation that everything else came from after that. And so, yeah, it's one of those stories where, I mean, there's talk of curses that go back to England, although
Hmm.
that those Dudleys didn't necessarily connect. Um, but it's one of those places that is just it still draws people in.
Yeah,
And
I think till this
yeah.
day it's like you can't even get through there, right? Like it's like fenced off or something like that. If to my
Yes.
understanding.
So the it's owned by a group called the Dark Entry Forest Association,
Mm,
and they do not take kindly to anyone going through there. Forever, there was a trail system called the Connecticut Blue Blaze Trails, which is like hiking trails. Like lots of states
okay.
have them. You were allowed to
Yeah.
hike through. And then, but then they started, writing up tickets for anyone that they thought was trespassing into Dudleytown looking for ghosts or whatever. And they get so in a huff about it that
Really?
they just keep putting out there, you can't come here, don't ever come here. It's called Dark Entry Forest Association, which doesn't help their cause.
No.
And it's funny because like I mean they anytime I'm speaking anywhere near there, they call like the venue and say, don't let them talk about Dudleytown.
Really?
Yeah, it's which by
They
the
go
way,
out
I
of their
mean,
way. They go
I
out of their way.
covered that story 25 years ago. I'm kind of done with it. Like
Yeah.
I've been there and done that.
Yeah.
However, I do have a solution for them if they would listen to me. Like what you got to do is you got to charge people $100 an hour to go in.
Hmm.
They'd go in and they'd be like, they ripped me off. That was a total ripoff for $100. And they'd be like, you're right. Go tell your friends that we
Right.
ripped you off. A
Hmm.
couple of months of that, you collect a bunch of $100, and then word gets around that it's a ripoff and not worth it, and no one goes anymore.
Right.
But no one listens to me, Will. No
No,
one
you're
listens to me. I have the answer.
you're too
That's the
smart,
answer.
Jeff. You're too
That's it.
smart.
There's your you can if you're listening, there's your answer. Do that. Your problem
Yeah.
solved in a couple of months.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean that story always intrigued me because I'm from Connecticut. I have family from Connecticut as well,
Yep.
and so that story, I brought it up to my mom when my mom was still alive. She's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about that story. We've heard it 1,000 times." And then of course in Waterbury, there's also Holy Land, which isn't so
Yes.
holy anymore.
I know right where it is. The cross on the
The big
hill, the whole
cross,
thing.
right? Yeah, you
Yeah.
can see it from
Yeah.
downtown Main Street. I actually used to live there, and down in Main Street, and I could actually see the cross from my bedroom window.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
faced that way. So I remember that, very vividly. Now they say that place is completely haunted. I'm not sure. I haven't been there in years, but they say that area is like completely just, yeah, inundated with ghosts and things
It,
of that nature.
so on Interstate 84, which is the highway that goes right by that mountain,
Right.
you used to be able to see some of the small buildings. It was called Holy Land because they were like miniature buildings that was like a replica of Jerusalem or something, right? And
Correct.
yeah, so yeah, no, I remember seeing that. There's also Little People Village, not in Waterbury. That was oh God, it was like a town. It was right near Quasi,
Quasi, yeah.
the amusement park, and someone owned a gas station and started building these little like stone buildings, and eventually they abandoned it, and it looked and it got the word got around that this was a fairy village. This is where fairies
Yeah.
lived.
Yeah.
And so the story just sort of persisted and persisted, and there was no one there to correct it. And yeah, Connecticut's got a lot of great
Yeah.
weird legends to it.
Yeah.
We all do. Every state does.
Every state, every
It's just
state.
that's what you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. So all the stories in the book, I found them all intriguing. But is there one that kind of stands out from the rest that you were like, man, like this one is just way out there. This is the one that, I'm like, oh man. Is there any that stand out to you that like that for you?
Well, so there's one, and we actually lead it off with this
Okay.
one. I was raised Roman Catholic in the interest of full disclosure, and
Hmm.
went to church every week, did all the stuff you're supposed to do all the way through confirmation, and then kind of stopped going to church once I hit college, and then just kind of I found spirituality in other ways,
Right.
and so that just wasn't quite for me anymore. And then, of course, mom was like, "Oh, you should go to church. You should go to church again." And I was like, "Mom, if I went to church, lightning might hit, and I don't want anyone innocent to get struck down."
Right.
And so you're like, "Ah, it's just a story." But then there's this grave in Bridgeport, and it's the
Mm.
grave of David Sherman, and it's a great old New England death head, a old historic stone. In July of 1771, I will read you the epitaph. It's short. It
Yeah.
says,
Please.
Here lies buried the body of Mr. David Sherman, who was killed by lightning in the house of God at public worship on the 28th of July, 1771, in the 35th year of his age.
Mm, mm.
What?
Yeah. Got
That can
struck down by
happen?
God
He was
at
he was
church.
in church and got struck. So I'm the kind of person I saw this and I was just like, all right, I'm not eating, I'm not sleeping until I know what happened. And I
Right.
started to dig in, and the town of Fairfield, which you would know is like just
Hmm.
a couple towns away from Bridgeport, super close.
Yep. Mhm.
There was a history of the town, and that year only had one entry, and it was
Mm.
this
What is
lightning
it?
strike. And it turns out that the lightning hit a guy named John Burr and killed him first,
Mm.
then killed David Sherman, and then blew the shoe off of Burr's brother. So two people were killed by this lightning
Wow.
strike, and one guy lost a shoe in this one particular event inside church at public worship. And I was just like, yeah, I'm not going back
Wow.
to church. Like that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing, Will, and I'm willing to give this away. People can have this one for free. If you would like to be immortal, if that is any interest to anybody,
Okay.
what you need is a very funny or memorable epitaph on your headstone, and we will talk
Hmm.
about you for centuries and centuries to
Hmm.
come.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
David Sherman's one of them.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, lightning striking, hitting two people, killing two people, and blowing off a shoe off of another one. I mean, what's the possibility of that? You know, what I mean, that's just, that's rare. That's rare. And to be able to record it too in history and say, hey, listen, this is exactly what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because a lot of stuff happened in history that just wasn't recorded, obviously. But, thank God, things, are now. But so there's a few stories that I kind of want to get into. I don't want to
sure.
give the whole book away, obviously,
Go
but
ahead.
there are a few stories that I found very intriguing. I want to know about the vampire one.
Hmm.
Please talk to me about that because to me, this particular case I found very, very interesting regarding the vampire of Rhode Island. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so they're actually New England's full of vampire stories.
Mm.
The one I think you're talking about, Mercy Brown. The
Yes.
she's the most famous because she was also the last. That
Mm.
was 1892, which, by the way, that's I know it's 1800s. It sounds like long ago, and sure it is. However, that's not the Dark Ages. Like
No.
that was a very enlightened time with newspapers and all kinds of things going on.
Yeah.
Same year as Lizzie Borden, to give you some context. That
There
was
you
the same
go.
year as the Borden
People
murders.
have a weird thing about history, right, Jeff?
Yeah,
In certain when it comes to numbers, they say 18, and you're like, oh, that was centuries ago. That's for long, but really, honestly, wasn't that long ago. We're still talking about a 150-year difference at the end of the day, right?
at the end of the day, here's a better way to look at it. It was like three people ago.
Right. Exactly. Yeah,
Your
that's a better
your
way of
great
thinking about it.
your great grandparents.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe your great great grandparents, give or take, depending on how old you are. So
Right.
yeah, three people ago, four people ago, not
Hmm.
really that long. So you've got this thing called tuberculosis, consumption, and it
Hmm.
is a horrible bacteria that brutally eats people from the inside out.
Hmm.
Tuberculosis has killed a billion, with a B, billion people between the year 1800 and 2000 worldwide. It is still a
Yes.
huge global killer. And the thing about it is it's contagious, it's highly contagious, and it can kill you in a few weeks, it could kill you in a few months. Some people it took years, and some people could live with it the rest of their lives. But it was rough.
Yeah.
And for some families, it just wiped out the family. And other families were untouched. And now, even though they understood contagion, I mean, they knew if a kid comes in the house with a cold, pretty soon everyone in the house gets the cold. That wasn't rocket science.
Right.
But for some reason, this was so different because if you got it, it could be a death sentence. And some families, like in this case, the Brown family of Exeter, Rhode Island, first the oldest daughter died, and then something like a year later, the mother slash wife died of consumption, and then after that, their son Edwin got ill, and they sent him out to Colorado to breathe the mountain air because that seemed to help some people with tuberculosis.
Hmm.
And then the sister Mercy Brown got ill, and she died in the winter in January. And then Edwin came home because he's dying too. And so when medical science doesn't have an answer for you, like, look, hey, look, Mr. Brown, it's bad luck, right? You got bad
Hmm.
luck, your family caught it, and it went around. When your clergy says, look, it's God's will, and that doesn't sit right with you, folklore always has an answer. And vampires, before the days of, Nosferatu and Bram Stoker and stuff like that, vampires were walking corpses, probably closer to our idea of like a zombie. And
Hmm.
they would drain the lifeblood of the living. And if you could find the vampire and you could disrupt it, then you might be able to save the living. And you had to follow the lineage. So when Mercy Brown died in January, she was not buried because in New England the ground's frozen. So you put her in a keep, you put her in a little stone hut on the side of the cemetery, and then you wait for the spring thaw, and then anyone who died in the winter gets buried.
Hmm.
So it was March, and Edwin is not doing well. And so someone says, "Look, I think you're the victim of a vampire. If you can stop the vampire, you might be able to save your son."
Hmm.
And so he went and did the unthinkable to his daughter. He opened the keep. They found her body had moved.
Hmm.
And when they took the shroud off, she had hardly decomposed. They
Hmm.
had a medical doctor cut her chest open. They found liquid blood in her heart, which was the smoking gun for them that she was a vampire.
Hmm.
And they took the heart out, burned it to ashes, mixed it in elixir, and fed it to Edwin,
Oh my
and
gosh.
in an effort to break the vampire spell.
Wow.
And it didn't work. He died a few weeks later anyway. And this sounds incredibly strange. This sounds like diabolical, something none of us would ever do. But I don't know, to the parents out there, if you heard you had a 1 in a million shot of saving your kid and your other one's already dead, she's not going to get more dead.
Right.
You try it. And the
Yeah.
thing about this folklore cure, here's the strangest part. Once in a while it worked. Now,
Mm.
the skeptics would say that person was going to get better anyway, and or it's psychosomatic. Who cares,
Right.
right? You still
Yeah.
have cause and effect.
Hmm.
Vampires, the way you deal with a vampire is to disrupt it, and there's been lots that have been found just in New England, but all over the world.
Hmm.
So, for example, the most classic way to kill a vampire, right, is what? Wooden stake through the heart, right?
Correct. Yep.
Well, in folklore, what that was not so much about putting wood into the heart of a vampire. It was about nailing them down so they couldn't get up at night and
Mm.
walk the earth again. Sometimes you just flip the body over. Sometimes you decapitated them. Sometimes you just put a brick in their mouth. Anything to disrupt the vampire, or you burn the corpse.
Hmm.
And this happened all over because people were scared. They were
Hmm.
scared and they love their loved ones and they're trying to protect them any way they can, even if it makes no logical sense, even to them. When COVID hit, my podcast, we started doing lots of vampire stories because I remember thinking,
Yeah.
oh man, we've been here before. This has
Hmm.
happened before. It's just we weren't alive. And
Right.
and so we were telling these vampire stories kind of like, yeah, you're hoarding toilet paper and they were exhuming corpses and cutting the heart out. You know,
Same difference.
neither makes a lot of sense.
No. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But here we are, not acting rationally, even though we know in our minds, like, okay, contagions happen. They can be bad, like the Spanish flu and whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
But when you're in the heat of it, you start going, yeah, I'll drink bleach. That'll help.
Yeah, that'll work itself out.
Sure
It's
will.
amazing. It's amazing that even like something like that, and then like the whole Salem witch trials, that happened in the Northeast. I mean, that's another example of the same kind of thing what we're talking about here, where you know when they don't have an answer for something, they usually go to folklore, or they automatically say it's something that's evil, or
Yeah.
it's unpure. So, how much of an effect did that Salem witch trials have in the Northeast, all in all? From beginning to end.
Yeah, so there were lots of witch trials around New England. Salem's the most famous
Right.
because they documented it so well, because it was so meticulously documented, and it was a craze over the span of a few months. Whereas, for example, Connecticut, 10 years earlier, they had killed something like 12 people they accused of being witches, but not all at once. It was spaced out in different towns and so on.
Right.
Same reasons though, right? You have someone on the outside and you sort of other them and then you label them evil and you call them a witch and then they say
Mhm.
they're not a witch, which is exactly what a witch would say.
No, I'm not
And
a witch. I
that,
promise you.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
what a witch would say. Guilty.
Right.
Thank you so
Right.
much. You just
Right.
made my case for me.
Right.
So but the Salem witch trials, what doesn't get talked about enough is that there was a war happening just to the north of Salem and
Mm.
refugees were pouring down. It was the King William's War, and it was it was brutal. And so refugees are funneling down through Salem, and you had the rich folks saying, "Let the farmers take care of them, and we won't worry about it." And then you have preachers from the pulpit saying the minions of Satan are out there. Satan was not a concept to them. He was
Hmm.
literal. And when you hear that Native Americans are killing entire families, and
Hmm.
the preacher tells you that's minions of Satan, it's very real and tangible.
Right.
It's not like a ghost. I mean that happened 2 towns away, and
Right.
that's where your brain's at.
Hmm.
Of course, they're fighting for their homeland, but you label them evil because that's what you have to do to your enemy. You have to call them evil. God is with you and not with them,
Hmm.
clearly.
Right.
It's like at a football game. God has to take one side.
Oh yeah, they do. They have to take one side. You're right about that.
God
Yeah.
can't root for both teams. That wouldn't be
No.
right. So,
No, you
uh,
can.
so anyway, so you have this refugee crisis, and then you've
Hmm.
got this town that's sort of stretched thin. You've got a lot of outsiders coming in. Everybody's scared. A few people are on edge. Once the accusations start to fly, then it's too late. It just gets out of hand.
Yeah.
And that story, I mean, it's part of Salem's identity, but we also understand the idea of like a witch hunt or a witch trial. It happens at our PTA meetings. It happens at our neighborhood associations and like,
Hmm.
soccer clubs,
Yeah.
in politics. It happens everywhere. You label someone something that is indefensible. You're evil. You're a
Right.
witch. And
Right.
there's nothing you can do with that.
Right.
There's no
What
coming
are you gonna
back.
say? Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you gonna
Yeah.
say?
No, I'm
Nothing.
not. Okay,
Yeah.
good one. And here we are. Here we are again, 1692, straight
Oh
back.
boy. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also go ahead, I'm
Just
sorry.
just to quick close that loop real
Yeah.
quick. So like
Yeah.
that story is still important, right? That
Hmm.
story is still relevant because you sit there and
Right.
you go, "Oh, well, that's how bad it can get when we just start name calling each other
Hmm.
without having like logical debates or anything." It gets to the point where eventually you're like, "Yes, no, it makes sense. We should hang them, press them, kill them, whatever it takes."
Hmm. You would think that we've made progress in that department, right?
No,
You
not
would
at
think
all.
after all this time, we've made a little bit of progress. You would think, you know what I mean, that
You'd
we'd
think.
learn from our history, and things that happen. History always repeats itself. I'm a true believer in that.
It does, but these stories to me are a sermon from the past, right? The
Yes.
we and it's not up to me. I don't decide what we talk about or don't talk about. A community does. A community keeps the stories alive because we have unfinished business with it, right? We're still
Hmm.
trying to reconcile something that happened. And so we keep talking about it and it doesn't go away because we haven't sort of solved the problem. The sincere hope is that if something like the Salem witch trials haunts us, we have
Hmm.
a better shot of not doing it again, but I'm not so sure anymore.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, we're in a weird time for sure.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I can't, I can't disagree with you on that. But a question that I had for you, and because you're the guy that procures all this, right? You're the one
Hmm.
who takes in all this information from people all around the world, but in particular in this, in this area. But do you think now, in this era, do you think that whole folkloric thing is going away, or is it more stronger now in our generation now because of the procurement of having the internet and being able to get information out very quickly and this, disseminating information out very quickly? Do you think that whole folkloric type of thing has gone away, or has it gone stronger since the
It,
past?
it's on massive steroids now.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Folklore and legend, it was always, well, not for most of human history, it was a word of mouth story. I
Right.
would tell you something that I
Yeah.
heard or that happened to me. And
Hmm.
if I told you something so ludicrously stupid, right? If I was like, "Hey, Will, I was in downtown Miami today and I saw the Loch Ness Monster and the ghost of Elvis dancing a jig,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
right there on, and then they vanished." You'd be
Right.
like, "Okay, you're
Yeah.
nuts."
Right.
And which is fine, but you would never repeat that story. You wouldn't say, "Hey, guess what I
Hmm.
heard?" You'd let it go because it's too crazy.
Right.
If it sounded plausible, like in the realm of possibility, enough that even if you're 98% sure it's not true, that
Hmm.
2% sort of calls out and says, "What if?"
Hmm.
And maybe you get intrigued to go check it out for yourself, and maybe you tell someone else, and the story stays alive and it propagates and it moves and it goes from one person to another. It used to take weeks, months, years, generations for stories to evolve and change.
Publications, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And now it takes sometimes just hours. So you could put something, yeah, you put something out on social media. I
Yeah.
just saw a ghost here. Look at this weird photo. And then it gets shared, spread, mocked, tweaked, adjusted. And
Hmm.
by dinner time, suddenly it's viral and we're all talking about something. It's the same mechanics. It's just so much faster because
It's so
we're all
much.
interconnected.
Yeah. That's one thing
Yeah.
I always wondered. Yeah, because to me it was like, is that old, telling those tales, is that a passe thing now? You know what I mean? Since the generations have changed. But no, I'm glad to see that's not the case, that it's actually on steroids.
But I mean, so the art of storytelling, I think, well, no, it's alive and well in pockets. But what's
Hmm.
going on now, though, is that we're so bombarded with information.
Hmm.
150 years ago, just 150 years ago, like four people ago, right?
Yep, that's what we were
Um,
talking about. Yeah.
the biggest news in your town might be that like Jeff's cow had a calf. That would be the big news for the week, right? Like Jeff's cow had a calf. Wow, that's
Yeah.
cool. What color? What does it
Right.
look like? Is the cow okay? Everybody all right? Now we get so much information bombarded. We turn on our phones, we're getting texts, we're getting news alerts, we're getting, social media feeds. We get bombarded with information so much so that we don't know what to believe anymore.
Hmm.
And so to me, the art of talking one person to another and sharing stories, your personal stories, especially about something profound that happened to you, might
Hmm.
be the only thing that could save us, right?
Yeah.
Because when we talk, we connect. And I tell you something that makes me vulnerable, like, hey, I actually had a ghost sighting and it was really strange, but this is what happened. I'm trusting you that you're not going to
Hmm.
mock me or whatever. And then you might say, you know what? Something like that happened to me. And this is what happened to me. And you tell your story. And suddenly we're looking at each other going, oh, that's pretty cool. Look at us. We're
Yeah.
having a moment.
Right.
We had a connection. And that's the only thing I think that can save us at this point. Because if we were typing all this online, we'd just start flaming each other, and
Yeah, you're right. You're
it
right.
just
And it's
degrades.
funny. Yeah, it's funny because I was talking to my daughter the other day, and she's 10,
Hmm.
and she came into my room one night, and it was literally like around maybe 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and she was just standing there in the doorway with the door open, and she has long dark hair,
Yeah.
and so I hear the door open, and I see her standing there, and I'm like, I call out her name and she responds back to me, thank God, because if she didn't, it was going to be a problem. But, and then we talked about it the next day. I was like, honey, you can't do that to me. And she's like, why? I'm like, Dad's first ghost experience was a girl standing in his room when he was asleep. Like
Ooh.
that was my first ghost experience ever in my life.
What
I said,
happened? How old
so,
are you? Where was it? Come on.
oh, I was 7 years old, grandparents' house, super haunted house. House
Yeah.
was so old. I think it was made like in the early 1900s. It was like one of the very first houses built on that street.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, super creepy place. Got up one night, I saw a silhouette of a girl standing in the corner, like in a dress. I was like, that was it for me after that. I was always into the, strange and all that stuff after that point. But I told her, I was like, you can't do that to dad. You just can't do that. It just
Yeah.
it messes with your psyche a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So talking about that, and then talking about what we just spoke about before that, have you ever run into one of these stories where like it's gotten so distorted over time, and you actually go back to doing your research, and you're like, oh, this really wasn't like this. It was actually like this. Has that happened to you a lot of times, or does that
Sure.
not ever happen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Here's one
Okay.
Conjuring House.
Oh, let's hear it.
Yeah, so the Conjuring House, I live 30 minutes from there. And
Wow.
I've known about that house for years and years and years. Norma, who used to own it, was actually on the show Ghost Hunters way back
Okay.
when.
Yeah.
They did like half an episode on the house. No mention of Ed and Lorraine Warren. And by the way, when I was growing up, Ed and Lorraine Warren never talked about this house. It was just not that interesting of a case to them.
Hmm.
So it was weird. That was a movie I watched, and I watched it with my daughter at the time. She was probably like 12, and we both love horror movies. We've watched them
Yeah.
probably far younger than she should have, but we did. And so we watched the Conjuring movie, and when that movie was over, I said, "This is funny because this is the first time I've watched a movie where I knew just about every single person in the movie being portrayed in real life."
Oh,
So
wow.
so I knew
Okay.
Ed and Lorraine Warren. I know the whole Perrin
Right.
family. I know the
Right.
house. I know
Hmm.
and not only that, Keith and Carl Johnson were actually the first paranormal people in that house before Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were 18. They called the Warrens in on it. Like I know it all, right? I know the whole
Hmm.
story. And so in the movie, spoilers, but you should have seen it by now if you haven't. The house basically tries to eat Ed and Lorraine Warren. There's an emergency exorcism. It tries to kill them or whatever, and then they save the day.
Hmm.
And that's fine. But then I talked to Andrea Perrin and I talked to Roger Perrin about like what they went through, and they lived there for years and years and years. If the house was trying to kill them, they wouldn't have stayed that long.
Yeah.
They described it as it was very frightening at first, but then they sort of learned to live with each other and even sort of like the spirits attached to the house.
Ah.
Not that some scary things didn't happen. The one scene in the movie that Roger said was sort of close to the mark was Lorraine held a séance and the spirit of Bathsheba, right? Bathsheba
Right.
Sherman.
Hmm.
And so Roger did say his wife was thrown from the chair. He went to help her. Ed tried to stop him and said, "You don't touch someone who's under diabolical possession." He said he punched Ed in the nose and told him to get the hell out of the house and never come back. And,
Wow.
and that was the end of it. That's how the Warrens' time there ended. So I
Mm.
started looking in. Bathsheba Sherman is buried right in the center of town. Her headstone was kicked over years ago,
Wow.
but I looked it up, and she lived about 6 miles from this house, which, by the way, before the time of automobiles, that's a pretty good distance. You're not
Yeah.
going to just
Yeah.
walk over 6 miles or take a
Right.
horse unless you had business there.
Hmm.
I'm fairly certain she's never stepped foot in that house ever. Like,
Mm.
and not only that, uh, she was Lorraine Warren accused her of being a witch. She's buried in consecrated ground. I read her obituary in the newspaper. She was in good standing in her church and community. They spoke very highly of her in the obituary. No mention of ever like harming anyone.
Hmm.
But that name Bathsheba stuck out. And when you walk into this little cemetery in the center of town, like you saw it very prominently. It was almost like calling to you, Bathsheba,
Hmm.
right there. And however, that was a fairly common name back then. It's weird today, but back then that was not that unusual.
Hmm.
But that's the name that they stuck to, and suddenly she became this witch, which is totally not fair because this woman wasn't. No one ever thought she was in her life, and so now all these years later, she gets accused of being that. And
Wow.
so the only death we found on the property for sure was someone who died of exposure in the barn outside. He was a drunk and sort of passed out near there and died there.
Hmm.
Totally possible a family member may have passed away inside. But even the Perrin family thought they never thought it was Bathsheba or anybody else. They thought it was the second owners of the house that were haunting it. And so
Ah.
it's one of
Okay.
those things where you say, like, look, any house that's been around 300 plus years, it's probably, I mean, it's got to be something knocking around, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I get that. But what was really cool is the family plot. I was able to find it, and it was out in the woods on private property. I literally knocked on the door and said, "Can I go back to the cemetery?" And they're like, "Yeah, go ahead, have at it. Just careful, it's a mess back there." And
Hmm.
there's this little cemetery, and there's about 25 family stones, and there was the one that Roger says he saw this man the day he moved into the house. And
Hmm.
so haunted, sure. And I believe the parents had some very strange experiences, but that movie is not exactly a documentary.
Hmm.
Uh, but people don't know that. They see the movie and they think it is. They think that's pretty close to what happened, and
It's
it
far from the truth.
wasn't close at all. Not even
Yeah.
not even close at all.
Does that change your perspective on these movies that come out? Like, obviously they have the new Conjuring movie coming out this month, and it's making a big stir, of course, of bringing up the whole thing again. Does that give you a different look on how Hollywood takes these tales and just totally just Hollywood it up? You know what I mean, as they would say.
Yeah, no, so I sort of don't have a problem if you're making a fictional movie like that, and
Hmm.
and you need to make a scary movie. You've done this long enough, right? Like
Hmm.
real hauntings are subtle. Real
Yeah.
hauntings are so frightening because weeks go by and nothing happens, and you start to relax and calm down and say, "Okay, it must have been my imagination." And then there's the footsteps again, and suddenly you're on edge and you're home and you're looking over your shoulder. That's
Hmm.
way more frightening because it's very slow. It's slow and it's just enough to keep you uncomfortable.
Hmm.
But Hollywood's not going to make a movie like that. How do you do it, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah. That'd be
we
a
have like
slow burn
yeah, that'd be like
of a
James
movie, right?
Cameron, right? James
Right.
Cameron. I'm
Yeah.
going to make a 6 hour horror movie, and you can be like, all right, it's going to be way too long, James, because you're making it. Um,
Uh,
but yeah, so that's that. I mean, that's a real haunting, and that's why it's so frightening. So
yeah,
so Hollywood has to do its thing. My bigger
yeah.
concern is when I've worked on various documentaries, and I've worked on like a bunch of the shock
Mm,
docs and things like that, and I can see a producer's absolutely just willy-nilly making stuff up. And
yeah,
my answer is it's always it's very insulting, I admit, and it's confrontational, but I mean it. If you're a good storyteller, you shouldn't have to make it up, right?
yeah.
You should be able to just tell it properly and the eeriness will come through. You shouldn't have to make
Mhm.
up new stuff.
That's right.
And but tell that to them, you know?
Yeah. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, right? At the
Yeah,
end of the day,
right.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
I could
the,
make something sound like just as, innocent as going to, put gas in the car and make it sound creepy, right?
That's right. But
Yeah.
it's also too like when you listen to people tell their stories, and I've done it a lot over the years. I've heard thousands upon thousands of people share their experience with stuff that scared them or
Hmm.
changed them in some very profound way. And when someone gets into there's a zone people get into where you can tell they detach a little bit and they start to talk through what they went through, and you could tell they're reliving it for you right now,
Hmm.
which is
Hmm.
powerful. And when you
Yeah.
get someone into that place and they start talking and you get scared, even though you could be in like a very safe place and be like, whew, you find your heart rate going up a little bit
Yeah.
because that person just got into a zone where they're now reliving the thing and they're sharing something, not just the story with you, but the experience now. And that's profound. If you can
Mm.
capture that, you've got something that will affect more people way
Yeah.
better than just making stuff up that had nothing to do with the story or the case.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Going back to the book, Jeff, has there been any story in the book that's made you uncomfortable or maybe even question if you should include it into the book?
You know, I try to stay away from the modern stuff that's like where especially if like someone's died,
Hmm.
I've always called them fresh corpses. Uh, which I know, I mean, might as well if we're going to be crass, right?
Yes, yeah.
So fresh corpses still have loved ones around who don't take kindly to the notion of like you saying that
Mm,
their dad, husband, brother, sister, whatever is a ghost.
right.
Um, so we did mostly avoid that. And also too, like, a lot of stuff we covered it. It's not just haunts. Like we cover roadside oddities, we cover
Yep.
UFO, sites and monsters, cryptids and so on.
Hmm.
So yeah, I wanted this to feel more fun than touchy.
Hmm.
So yeah, we mostly avoided it. There was one story, and it didn't go in the book. It was about a brutal murder. A stepdad murdered his stepdaughter,
Oh,
and this was, by the way, this was probably like 90 to 100 years ago. So it was not a fresh corpse.
hmm.
However, it still bothered me, and I just remember thinking like, I mean, if I wouldn't do it today, why would I do it then? And
Right.
and it was just one of those stories that was just so dark that I didn't think it fit.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, because you're trying to, do something out a certain way, and then you get a story like that, it just kind of throws it off left field. You're just like, yeah, can I bring it back after this story?
Well,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
right.
it's
What
it's a
story am
dark
I going to put
place.
ahead of this story? You know what I mean? I'm going
Uh,
to put Champ ahead of that. I mean, come
yeah,
on. You know
right,
what I
right,
mean?
right.
Right.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting. You've built an incredible career, Jeff, exploring haunted places and odd history. And, where do you see yourself, taking your research from here? You obviously have Wicked Strange. I mean, are you planning on coming out with, more books and more different stories from the Northeast? What's your plans,
So, I mean,
if you don't mind me asking?
yeah, no, of course. If you want the truth, I don't know,
Yeah.
but but in reality, like, okay, this is what this is, and this is what my podcast is the Northeast, and only because this is home for me, because I
Hmm.
I know people here, and I can I have better access to these stories than I do, other parts of the world.
Hmm.
However, everything intrigues me, and I
Hmm.
love to travel and I love to get around and explore different things. So yeah, I'm gonna write more books. I've written 16 now, so like, what's one more at this point?
12. Yeah. Yeah.
But also projects sort of just fall out of the sky sometimes.
Mhm.
And something I haven't been thinking about suddenly might become to the forefront, where you're just like, oh, that's a good idea. That's worth working on.
Mhm.
So I don't have a current plan because I've just been so busy with this one. Also, on a personal level, my daughter just graduated high school back in
Oh,
June.
congratulations to her.
Thank you, thank you. And she started college this past Thursday. And
Awesome.
so, yeah, so like that has taken up most of my brain this year.
I'm sure.
And
Yeah.
she's our only kid. So like, and like, I'm a fan. Like, she's amazing. She's like this
That's
awesome
awesome.
person.
Yeah.
I miss her, man. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
hard. It's hard.
I'm sure that's like a big change for having her at the house all the time, and then all of a sudden
Yeah.
she's not there all the time, and you just gotta
Yeah.
make sure you get Zoom calls, and that's how you gotta check in with each other. You know what I mean? So
It's
yeah, I
so
can
fun.
imagine.
I look around, I'm like, where's the mess? Like, there should be shoes and stuff lying on the floor, and they're not. What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
I
So,
get it. Yeah.
but I'm also trying to tell myself, like, all right, she's in a good place. She's rocking it. She's going to do great things. Time to make another push on my career. What's something I want to pursue? And
Exactly.
so for me, like I've always let the story dictate. There's stories that you hear about and you're like, oh, that's a podcast. And then others you think that might be a whole book, or maybe that's a documentary film. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what's going to happen next, but I adore that I've become a magnet for these stories because people are always feeding them to me at this point. So thank
Yeah.
you everyone for the job.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and keep them coming. Yeah, listen, if you ever do anything in Florida, I got a pretty good story. The Devil's Tree in Hobe Sound, Florida, and
Okay.
it's a great story. I don't think it's ever gotten enough attention, but it's regarding a guy who used to be a sheriff's officer. His name was Gerard Schaefer, John
Hmm.
Gerard Schaefer, and he actually ended up being a serial killer at the same time. So he would basically pick up hitchhikers,
Right.
women that were on the side of the road, and this is in the late 70s at this time, and he would basically take them off to this particular tree, torture them, kill them, and then just get away with it. He did that for years until finally a couple of them got away and ended up going to the same police station that he was actually at.
Wow.
So yeah,
God.
it's a crazy story, but if you ever look into it, take a look into that. It's a great story. It's called The Devil's Tree
Well,
in
why don't
Hobe
you write
Sound.
it?
Maybe I will. Maybe
I
one day.
mean,
You're my inspiration at this point.
I mean, like, so I mean,
Yeah,
if that's something that calls to you. So for me, just a writing geek for a second, like,
please. Yeah.
so for me, writing is an exorcism. And so, like, I'll
Mm,
get an idea for something. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, that'd be a great book. Not for me, for someone else. Like, it's a cool story. Someone should write that, but it's too much of an investment for me. It doesn't call enough.
mm,
If I think of an idea, I'm like, oh, that's pretty good.
mm,
And then a couple days later, it's still there, and I go, "Oh no, it's not leaving me alone, is it?" And then weeks later, it's still gnawing at you. Like it will start to haunt me. And sometimes the
mm,
only way to get rid of that ghost is the exorcism of putting it down on paper and saying,
mm,
"Okay, little bird, fly." Like let's see what happens.
mm.
So if that story's been gnawing at you, I'm not
Yeah.
saying you have to write a book, but maybe you do like a special podcast series on it. Maybe you
Yeah.
do a documentary on it. Maybe whatever it is that feels right.
Hmm.
Um, there's a reason certain stories call to us, and I call it magic, call it whatever you want. But I truly believe there is sort of this cosmic connection that sometimes happens where a story needs a teller, and
Yeah.
and if you keep thinking about it, maybe that's because you're the teller. You're the person
Very.
that's supposed to tell it.
Yeah. You might be right. Who knows? Maybe one day I can come up with my own Wicked Strange of Florida.
Wicked Strange Florida, do it. Hey,
You know?
listen, anytime the news is like, crazy man bites face off of
Oh,
homeless
it's in
person
Florida.
on crack, we're like, oh, what part of Florida did that happen?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah. What's Florida man like? Have you met him?
Yeah. Well, I live partly like him.
Yeah. Yes.
It's avoiding a lot of danger constantly.
Right.
You're in constant danger, really, at
Yeah.
the end of the day. You know what I mean? Can't put your foot in a lake. You can't put your toe in a canal. You got to be careful if you go to the beach. It's constant danger. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. Yeah. Hey, look, every town, every state, every region has its weirdness. We all have our haunts and we've got our monsters and we've got,
Hmm.
all kinds of things. And that's what makes them sort of special,
Yeah.
because these our towns are getting so homogenized. They just look like each other now.
Yep.
And they've
You're
lost a
absolutely
lot
right.
of character. But these stories belong specifically to these communities.
Yeah.
And I think that's it's a great way to see the world. It's a great way to get into a culture of a particular town
Hmm.
through their legends. And
Yeah.
and and when I say legend, by the way, I don't mean made up story necessarily. I just mean a story takes over after something
Yeah.
profound happens.
Hmm.
So it doesn't mean that there's not a ghost behind it or a monster behind it, but the thing gets bigger
Yeah.
than it originally was, and that's the legend.
Yeah, I've always said that listening to stories of the locals and eating their food are the two best ways of incorporating yourself into, their culture and figuring out what they do, how they do it, and their histories and things of that nature. But finally, Jeff, where can my listeners grab a copy of Wicked Strange, and where can they follow your podcast and your projects and everything like that, please?
Yeah, yeah. So, well, the book's available anywhere books and ebooks are sold. So, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or your favorite local bookstore, they can always order it.
Hmm.
My podcast is New England Legends, and that's anywhere you get your podcasts. You can get it for free. And my website is my name, jeffbelanger.com. And this fall, I've got a pretty big story tour, especially in the Northeast. I've got like 40 dates between now and December,
Wow.
where I'll be sharing these stories in person with some of Frank's photos
Hmm.
and that's actually my favorite thing to do. I like being in front of an audience and
Yeah.
watching them like react to the tales. So I
Yeah.
love this stuff. I love talking to other fellow seekers
Yeah.
and people that are exploring the weird and the strange, and that's my people.
There you go, man. Listen, Jeff, you are awesome guest. I'm honored to have you on here. It's an honor and a pleasure. Everybody, please go check out Wicked Strange. Go find that on Amazon and anywhere books are sold. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, and we'd love to have you on in the future again, please.
Sounds great. Well, thank you.
All right, Jeff. Hey, listen, be safe, safe travels on the tour, and we'll have you back on in the future. Okay, my friend?
Sounds great.